Okay, welcome to another edition of the Edlow Podcast. Tonight it is just me. I say tonight because it is late. I just got back from the Kings Clippers game after also seeing the Kings Warriors game last night, which was absolutely phenomenal. Tonight, not so much, but if you know anything about the NBA, you know about basketball, tonight was basically a scheduled loss. I mean, back to backs traditionally, the teams who are playing them, are going to lose. And on top of that, um, as hard as the Kings worked against the Warriors to pull off that game, winning that game by 1 point, moving on to the play-in or in the in-season tournament to the quarterfinals, and I mean that Warriors Kings rivalry is that's starting to bud since the last playoffs is really exciting. There's just no way that they were going to be able to take on, in my mind, no way that they were going to be able to take on Kawhi Leonard, Russell Westbrook, Paul George, and James Harden. It just wasn't in the cards. As a Kings fan, I got to say I'm very very excited about the changes they made. Sasha, I keep getting his name wrong. Sasha Vashenkov. I mean, he's developing. He's starting to come into his own. First few games was a little eek. They're doing this without Keegan Murray, who I think is a perennial all-star in a couple of years. I mean, with them signing Sabonis and Fox, I do believe, to long-term deals, I do believe that Fox, Sabonis, and Murray are the big three of Sacramento. And it's cool that it's kind of homegrown, not completely, but kind of. I'm really just excited about the little changes they made, signing Harrison Barnes to a long-term deal at the price that they did. They just made a lot of deals that made a lot of sense. Not to say there's not some tweaks that need to be made. Oh, JaVale McGee. I really like that pickup as well. Um, get some championship caliber and a big there. So yeah, good stuff. I took my daughter to this game. It was the first game she's been at all season. And yeah, she ended up walking away. My ticket guy gave her a free Sabonis jersey for no apparent reason, which I thought was really cool. And she, they were throwing shirts in the crowd. She got a shirt. They were giving out hats. I mean, she basically walked away with a whole wardrobe. So she was pretty excited about it, even though the Kings got absolutely demolished. So fun night, but makes for a late night. So yeah, today, I'm going to do what I normally do. I actually have three different messages that came through over the last month that I'm going to address, and then a bunch of anonymous things that came through on that little app I use. If you ever want to submit an anonymous comment or question, you can. Usually at the end of the month is when I do these. And if you follow me on Instagram and Facebook, I'll post the link probably like a day or two before it'll be released. So just be on the lookout for it, and you can submit a question, or you can always just directly message me or email me your question. I promise that whatever you send out there, I won't judge, and it comes out anonymous. Okay, let's just get straight to the Q&A. All right. You should be my bestie. How do you know we're not besties? I don't know who you are. So I've got a bestie. So unless you're that person, um yeah, good luck. But yeah, there you go. All right. Next. I want to be your friend so badly. Well, I don't know why you don't think you are my friend. Um I don't know who you are, but if you did something to not be my friend, um, that might be the reason why you're not. I don't know. I don't have anybody, maybe one person in the world, well, a couple people in the world that okay, well maybe there's a handful. There's probably a lot more people than I'm being honest about that I can't be friends with. And they know who they are. If you're on that list, them's the breaks. If you're not, I don't know why you don't think you are. So feel free to come talk to me about it. Okay. What are you doing? I am recording a podcast late at night after two Kings games in a row, which are fun. Back to backs are a little bit hard, quite frankly. Coordinating, getting my kids where they need to go, and getting off of work and doing all that. It's tough, but it's fun. The, the season ticket thing is actually really cool for me just because it's a good excuse for me to get one-on-one time. In fact, I'll just say this, tonight, Lexi was both nights actually, last night and tonight. Um, both of the kids, Lincoln and Lexi, who went, they started off in let's just say an emotionally foul mood. Lots of stuff that happened in the last week or two, that traumatic stuff that came kind of from the outside that we're working through, and so they were struggling. But the cool thing about it is we were able to have a talk about focusing on what you can control and being grateful for the things you have. And by the end, especially tonight, Lexi was struggling a bit, and then by the end of the night, she just would not stop talking, and which I love, because it's fun to get her talking about the things that are important to her: school, friends, theater, what she worries about, what makes her anxious, what she thinks she's doing well. It's just fun. So that's what I'm doing. How are you today? Man, we just have some big important anonymous questions today. I am doing fine. I'm sure that was very convincing. It's actually been a rough day. Nothing huge, just dealing with a lot of stuff when you manage people in your life, and then also in your job or in other places. You got to manage these personalities all the time. That makes it's a bit of a struggle sometimes, and unfortunately I had to deal with that a little bit more today than I normally do, which I don't like to do because it takes the focus away from the work. But other than that, doing fine. I'm very blessed. There's a lot of things I could be grateful for, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Okay. I really like you. Okay, so these aren't questions, but I appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate um I appreciate the gesture. It actually does. I know I kid, but I appreciate it. I haven't seen you in so long. So when you send these anonymously, I can't fix these problems. So um yeah, hopefully, reach out to me. I don't have a lot of time, but there are people in my life that I do try to make efforts with. And some of my friends, I got to say, like, I might be a bad responder, texter. Might say, "Hey, by the way, I'm gonna call you at this time or whatever," and then I get caught up in something, and then I don't. I think right now I have like 100 and something text messages, unread text messages, um, and just know that I know I'm bad at it, but I do care. So there's that. All right. Who is your favorite indie wrestler, and why is it Trip Rogers? Okay, so legit on a shoot, and wrestlers know what I mean by that. Trip Rogers is actually one of my favorite indie wrestlers, and he gets it. I'm telling you, he gets it. He understands what to do in the ring. And this is this is probably the place where people who aren't wrestling fans are gonna be like, all right, I'm gonna fast forward or turn this off. Go ahead and fast forward if it doesn't matter to you. But for the wrestling fans, there's just little things that he does. And I see a little bit of that also in his tag partner JMM. I think I'm saying that right. I've only seen him once or twice. Like, I'll give you an example. And this is kind of pulling the curtain behind, but I was watching Trip wrestle in a tag match, actually, with at Next Level. pro wrestling, and he was wrestling these two cowboys. I know there's a little bit of heat there or whatever, not from Trip, but I mean like, and anyway, and in the match, you know, Trip is the heel and he's working this cowboy down, and and the cowboy comes up and he gives him a little bit of a false comeback. And when Trip cuts him off, he then changed speeds for a couple of minutes and just started wailing on the guy, right? That type of stuff is the little stuff that matters, right? He did that, and I just thought to myself, man, like he understands, right? Because it's this guy got a little bit of a, he got a little bit of an edge. Trip recognized it, a little shocked by it, so started, going faster on him for a minute, and then took his time. And it's just little stuff like that. He understands the ring psychology. I don't think he knows how good he really is, but I know that a lot of others do. Some of my other favorite indie wrestlers, I'll just talk about people that I've booked that I love. I will book Johnny Butabi every show if he's available. Mike Rain. They're both just awesome. I booked them. Quite frankly, it became a running joke that when I was running SWF shows, Johnny Butabi versus Mike Rain was on every single show because it's just so entertaining and they were so good at it. Dark Sheik is great. Knows what she's doing. And these are some of the older. I mean, everybody knows Chupacabra can put a match on all over the place. I loved Derevko. I love Derevko just because I just love Derevko. He's fun. So there's a lot of guys out there that I think are good on the female side. Love Christina Von Eerie. Brooke Havoc has been fun to watch. And so yeah, I mean, a lot of good talent out there. If you want to go see indie wrestling, you really can't go wrong right now. Okay. What's the one thing you hate to hear when you're interviewing a new attorney? Oh, that's interesting. This is going to sound weird, but I think the one thing that annoys me the most is when they say they want work-life balance. Now, I want to make it very clear. That does not mean that I don't want them to want to have time to enjoy things that they enjoy, or that they that I don't want them to spend time with their families or their kids or anything like that. But what do you really mean when you say I want work-life balance? And what really is work-life balance? So does that mean you don't want to work more than 40 hours a week? Because that ain't gonna fly. If you want to work as a personal injury attorney who actually goes and tries cases, that's not gonna happen, right? At least not off the bat, and really not ever. Okay. I mean, if you're doing it right. So so there's that. And the other thing is also is like I work hard, I work a lot of hours, and I got a lot of other interests, and I got 4 kids that are all very, very busy. So I do all of those things. I work hard, I'm there for my kids, I'm there doing all of these other things. So do I have good work-life balance? Like, you can be an A+ father and be an A+ attorney. You can. It's possible. You just have to schedule your time. That doesn't mean that you are going to be able to stream all your favorite shows and go to the movies all the time, and that you're gonna be able to, you know, uh, go do something at 3 o'clock in the afternoon every day. That's not possible necessarily, but you can schedule time to go to your kid's basketball game or football game. You can, listen, I'm up at 4:45 every single morning, hit the gym, get my kids ready, do all that stuff, go to work, get to extracurriculars. I very rarely do I miss an extracurricular event or any of that stuff. I'm still able to go to concerts, go on trips, go on work conferences. I get it all done. but it's busy and it's tiring. So, yeah, when I hear someone who says, "I want work-life balance," it tells me I'm not willing to put in the work I need to be successful. If you disagree, you can tell me, but that's just my experience. So, as someone who's seen a lot of attorneys come and go. Okay. Let's see what this next one. My friend has had a crush on you for the longest time. Um, well, tell your friend thank you. I'm flattered. Um, and that's it. Okay. Let's see. This is an interesting one. Could you share your testimony? Yeah, I'll share a bit of my testimony, sure. So I would say, let me talk about the moment when I knew that uh the church was true and that Jesus was the Christ. Um, and this is just my own personal experience. It's different for everybody. If you're a non-believer, you can think what you want about it. This is just my experience. So, I served a mission in Indiana. I started in May 24th, 2000 is the day I left for the Mission Training Center in Provo, Utah. And I spent 3 weeks there. And in June, I went to Indiana. I ended up in Indianapolis. They picked me up from the airport. I had never experienced humidity like that in my life. And the very next day, I ended up in a little area called Fall Creek, which is right in the heart of the worst part of Indianapolis. And it was a very small branch, 30 30 members. Most of them newer members, so they didn't have a lot of experience in church leadership or anything like that. They had to set what we call satellite in people for leadership, meaning they didn't live in the technically in the congregation boundaries, but they brought them in from other wards to kind of help build the ward up. So there was 30 members there, and a lot of apostolic Pentecostal background. So church was interesting. We met at the third floor of an office building, and when I got there, um, my companion, I asked him, I was like, "When's the last time that there had been a baptism in our area?" And he said, "It's been about 5 years." And he said, "Well, I should say, about a month ago, we had someone who we baptized, but he got arrested before we could get him confirmed." So that was where I was, and because the membership was so small, um, there was not a lot of membership work to do. So there was a lot of tracting. For those of you who aren't members of the church, what that means is literally just going around and knocking door to door, inviting people to hear your message of religion and Jesus Christ. And so for probably 3 or 4 weeks, every day, 10, 11 hours a day, we were knocking doors in the heat, in the humidity, in white shirts and ties and black pants, riding bikes all over the place. I had to learn how to ride a bike, by the way. That's another story that has nothing to do with it, but so I had to do that. And we were just getting nowhere. Rejection time after time after time. And then sometimes when we would talk to people, they were very, I mean, we're that's at the north of the Bible Belt. So everybody there who had religious views had very staunch religious views, and they would argue with us. And it seemed to me as though they were just as sure about their version of Christianity as we were of ours. Now, up until this point, I would say that I had a testimony, but it was a very loose testimony and was probably more of a social testimony and more of a testimony that was reliant on others. So this was the first time, and I'd never had like I mean, I had prayed before, there's the Moroni's promise in Moroni chapter 10, verses 3 through 5, where it says, if you pray, ponder and pray, and you read these things, ponder them in your hearts and ask God if they're true. Um, that he'll manifest the truth of it to you. He'll tell you whether it's true or not. So I'd done that, but I'd never had a necessarily overwhelming confirmation of those things. So I just kind of went through the motions and went. And I wasn't necessarily even the strongest member. I mean, I did a lot of things that I know my bishop and stake president weren't super proud of. And so anyhow, here I am doing these things, and I started really kind of struggling. And we were sitting at lunch one day, or maybe it was, nah, I don't think it was. Yeah, it was. It was lunch. We were sitting there, me and my companion, this guy I'd known for 3 weeks, Jason Norris, who is seriously one of the most seminal people in my life, one of the most important people in my story. And this is one of the many reasons for that. So he could tell that something was wrong. And he said, what's up, Elder Edlow? And I said, how do we really know this is true? And he goes, well, what do you mean? And I go, well, we go and we talk to these people, and they just seem to be just as, sure about their religion as ours. They are just as sure that the Book of Mormon isn't true and Joseph Smith wasn't a prophet that we are when we tell them that, he is, and that the Book of Mormon is true. So he looked at me and he goes, well, Elder, let me ask you a question. What do we ask people to do when they ask us whether what we're teaching them is true? And I said, well, we ask them to pray about it. And he dropped to his knees right there and said, will you pray with me right now and ask God if Jesus is the Christ and whether the Book of Mormon is true? And I was pretty shocked because I was not expecting that. And I felt kind of dumb as I was getting on my knees, because I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. How is it that I am possibly in a position on my mission to be asking God if these things are true? How'd I get here? Right. But something was different this time about the prayer. I talked about Moroni 10, 3 through 5, where essentially, for those of you who don't know, Moroni is a book in the Book of Mormon, which is another testament of Jesus Christ. It's a companion to the Bible, different people, different continent. There's a book in that book, in chapter 10 and verses 3 through 5, a promise that Moroni the prophet gives, which says that if you, he says, if you read these things and you ponder them in your heart, I implore you to ask God with real intent whether they're true. And if you ask with a sincere heart with real intent, he'll tell you whether it's true or not. Obviously paraphrasing. And so I think the difference in this prayer was the part about the real intent. Sometimes, this is just the gospel according to Josh Edlow, this may not be true at all, but this is what I think. Sometimes I think that God doesn't answer prayers because we may not be ready for the answer, or we don't really want to know for whatever reason. This time I wanted to know. And as I knelt down, I remember thinking to myself, okay, I can't be middle of the road anymore. This prayer, and I just said this before I said the prayer out loud, I was saying this to myself, and it was almost maybe a conversation with God to myself that my companion couldn't hear. But I remember thinking to myself that day, I said, this is it. Whatever answer I get, I'm following it. If I get the answer that this isn't true, I'm leaving today. I'm going home. I'm not going to church anymore. I'm moving on. But if I do, then I'm committed. I'm doing the whole 2 years, and I'm doing it balls to the wall. I didn't even get through the prayer, and I got my confirmation that it was true, and it was undeniable. And so, with tears in my eyes, I looked at my companion and I just said, "Let's get to work." And I committed that day to myself that I was going to commit for that entire 2 years every ounce of energy I have. And that moment changed my life because I believed it, and I still do. And that is one of many experiences like that, some of which I don't ever discuss because they're just too too personal. And so when you talk about my testimony, there's something that I learned that day. And it wasn't just that, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the true church on the earth. It gave me an understanding of the Savior, Jesus Christ. It was the first time that I realized that if every other person other than me was perfect, and I was the only one that needed it, Jesus would have gone through that atonement specifically for me. I felt that he knew me by name, he knew my issues, he knew who I was, that he loved me, and that I was exactly in the place that he wanted me to be, even if it wasn't the place that I exactly wanted to be. And I have noticed that in my life, since that time, I have had all sorts of plans that I thought was going to happen. And every time those plans didn't happen, I got real angry. I got real, sometimes even a little bitter. But man, he always puts you in the place that you need to be to truly be happy. And so um, that moment was so important to me because since then I've gone through all sorts of crazy stuff. I mean, anybody, I tell my kids when they get dramatic and they're like, "This is the worst day of my life," and I was just like, "Worst day of your life so far." Like, hate to tell you, it don't, you know, peaks and valleys. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's worse than what you're feeling now, right? But the great thing is that the Savior's always there, and that atonement that he is can right any wrong. And it's not just about your sins. It's not just about the wrong things that you do. It's not about just saying, "Oh, you're forgiven of those things." It's also a healing power to right the wrong that you can't right. It's healing of your he didn't just, take your sins, he took your sadnesses, your sicknesses, your weaknesses. He took on your depression, your anxiety, your all of these things, he took them on so that he can succor you, so that he could understand, and you can put that on him and have peace even in those hard times. And since then, I've read the Book of Mormon numerous times. I've read the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Doctrine and Covenants, the Pearl of Great Price, Jesus the Christ, A Marvelous Work and a Wonder, um, uh, Gospel Principles. There's a bunch of books I can't even remember. I've read everything I could get my hands on to learn about the Savior. And there's one thing that I always come back to, and that is the Savior loves you, even if nobody else does. He loves you, he wants you, and you matter. And that is amazing. And so uh, there's not a lot of things I know in life. But the one thing I do know is that Jesus of Nazareth is the Christ, and that salvation can come through him. And so that's my testimony. Thanks for asking. I haven't shared that in a long time, so thank you for asking. Um, okay. Have you had any recent spiritual experiences? Yeah, I did actually. It was really interesting because I had a Sunday not too long ago. It was actually our primary program, and I only have one kid left in primary. And I was thinking about that. I was like, oh my goodness, I only have you know, one of my biological kids that are still, still there. And and that was just crazy to me. And so, but I remember I was just having a really kind of a rough day. Some stuff had happened, and the kids started singing a child's prayer. And I encourage you, if you don't know what that is, you could just Google it. You can listen to it. I'm sure it's on Spotify somewhere or Apple Music or whatever you listen to, YouTube. And it just reminded me that God's there. So yeah. And those are the things, right? Like those are the things that are most important. I shared this big testimony building huge moment where kind of life-changing moment. Most of the time when the spirit hits you, it's not like that. It's little things like that. Just something to get you through something hard. Or even not hard, just kind of annoying, bothering, right? Okay. Um let's see. How do you deal with people spreading rumors about you or saying bad things about you? Uh, Stop caring. Uh, I mean, think about this. Why would you care about what someone thinks about you who doesn't know you or who doesn't really know you or doesn't really care about you, who doesn't have your best interest at heart? Like, I don't understand why we care. If you are comfortable with where you're at, if you're comfortable with what you're doing, if you think that what you're doing is the best route for you and yours and the best route, and you've thought it through and you've really, you know, come through it, what do you care about some person who doesn't know your story and doesn't understand where you're coming from saying something that's probably not true? Or even if it is, who cares? So, yeah, stop caring. Let's see. Okay. What is something about guys you don't understand? Uh, Spitting in urinals. I don't get it. What is the why? What is that? And for the lady folk out there who are wondering what I'm talking about. No, literally what I'm talking about is before some guy goes to the bathroom, he'll spit in the urinal. I don't can anyone explain that to me? Send me a message. I'll explain it in my next Just Me next month because I don't get it. Anyhow, okay. Now, let's see. What do we have next? What do you think of CM Punk's return? I thought it was kind of lame to overshadow Randy Orton's return. Okay. Good. Okay. I don't think so. This is like armchair booker, right? Like I'm going to tell the WWE how they're supposed to run their business. Look, in my opinion, I understand what you're saying. Like, did it overshadow Randy Orton and all that? Yeah, sure it did. Um, but and I think in the best of circumstances, you'd like those to come separately. But I mean, that was a lightning in the bottle moment. They're in Chicago. He just came off his non-compete. Everybody was waiting for it. The rumors have been flying. Um, I was excited about the return. Now, fun fact, me and my 2 boys, we actually went when he returned to wrestling in AEW. We actually went we were in the front row of Rampage in Chicago when he showed up. So it was a big deal for us. My kids were super stoked about it when it happened, this last Sunday or whenever it happened. So, and I was really excited because I thought to myself, this is going to be cool. It's going to be cool to see CM Punk work some of these guys, or have promos with that Grayson Wallace guy, or like, or have he's been going back and forth with Miz for a while, Seth Rollins, like having a match. Now that all these guys, the Shield guys, have kind of become the top guys, he's the one who brought him in. There's a cool story there with Seth and with Roman Reigns and like all this different stuff. But I'll say that if I'm going to be critical about something, I didn't like. I when I heard his promo, and I wasn't watching it live. I watched it later, but his promo where he says "I'm home," uh, I I kind of didn't like that. And there's a couple of things that I think I don't like about that. I did a podcast recently with Santino Marella, and we talked about CM Punk, and he said something that I think resonated with me. He said, talking about CM Punk and Will Ospreay, he said, the guys, he was talking about them possibly coming to Impact Wrestling, to TNA. And he said, sure, they could go and make a bunch of money in WWE and all that stuff, but I just don't know if they're that guy. If he was the guy, he could come to TNA and he could really lift this ship up and make it akin to AEW and help wrestling in general. And so, considering all of the stuff, and then one other thing, and then so spoiler alert, I've actually recorded a podcast that will be released later this month with none other than Jake the Snake Roberts. And he said something interesting too about promos and wrestling in general. He said, if you don't believe what you're saying, if you don't believe it, you're just reading it, or you go out there and you go through the motions, the people will see through it and you will lose credibility. And once you've lost your credibility, you really don't have a leg to stand on. Now, I was there in the crowd when CM Punk cut a promo on the WWE and why he was gone for so long, and saying things like, I was never going to get better by staying in the place that made me sick in the first place. I remember him saying that. And it felt genuine. It felt real. And all of the stuff he said since about the way the WWE works and the way that they don't promote the right wrestlers and all this different stuff. And then for him to come back after all of that, and after getting fired from AEW for bad behavior, and coming back to the WWE and saying, I'm home. For me, I mean, I'd love to hear him go on a podcast and explain the reasoning behind that, because right now it didn't sound genuine or credible. I could be completely wrong, and he may be able to explain that, but just hearing it on its face, it didn't sound credible. So we'll see what happens for him. Hey, I'm excited about it. I think there's a lot of cool stuff that could happen. I'm just glad he's back in wrestling. So, okay, let's see. So here, I got a few different questions here that I wanted to address. We'll just go right through them. I think these are actually some pretty good questions, and I'd like to answer them. So, Josh, you seem to me to be rather conservative, but yet I noticed that on podcasts in the past you have mentioned that you do believe there is systemic. He says it's systematic, but it's actually systemic racism. It says, I'm curious, can you point me to the law that is racist? Because I can't find one. All right. So this is the old Ben Shapiro argument. And by the way, I like listening to Ben Shapiro. I also listen to Bassem Youssef and Sam Harris and a lot of different guys, because I love all the differing perspectives. But this is something that I think Ben Shapiro should know better when he says, oh, well, where's the racist law? Because anybody who's taken high school government, let alone being a UCLA trained lawyer, should know that is not the right way to ask this. So let me just explain what I mean by that. So when you say something like, well, let's just back it up. High school civics or government class, three branches of government. There's the legislative branch, there's the executive branch, and there's the judicial branch. Okay. And each one is separate but equal, right? Well, not separate but equal, but separation of powers, right? They all have their parts. The legislature creates the law, the executive enforces the law, the judiciary interprets the law. So they all have a different function. So when you say something like, can you point me to the law that is racist? What you are saying is, can you point me to the law that the legislature has created that is in fact racist? My answer to that is as far as I sit here today, I can't point to one, right? I can't point to one that on its face says black people are treated this way and white people are treated that way. That is not there. But that is not the end of the analysis. That is one branch of government. So if you're only looking at the law that's been created, you are missing the point. You're missing 2/3 of the analysis, because let's look at the executive branch and enforcement. Who is the executive branch? The president, the military, and in your state, the police. The police are part of the executive branch. They're enforcing the law, right? So if a policeman with the law is arresting black people at a higher clip for the same crimes or the same infractions, and they are treating them differently, if they are arresting them more, if they are pulling them over more, if they are treating them differently, if they're letting white people go that aren't letting black people go, then the enforcement is racist. Similarly, so, and by the way, studies have shown this. Studies have shown, and they're all over the place, that show that over the country, generally, that black people are arrested and also, pulled over and held at a higher rate for the same infractions than white people, with the same records and the same everything. When they look at them, that's just the way it is. And that is not to say, by the way, that a police officer is looking that way, like they're consciously saying that. It just, systemic racism isn't about necessarily intent. Systemic racism is about, is it happening to one race over the other? Now, same thing with the judiciary. So the judiciary is not just the Supreme Court, it's also your local courts. So if judges over the United States are, we have these sentencing guidelines all over the place, where you look at a crime and you say, okay, this is a crime that could be 5 years at the low end and 15 years at the high end, right? And they can go anywhere in between. There's all these sentencing guidelines that are supposed to help judges determine how they sentence. Well, if they are sentencing one race over another race, um, at a higher rate, or using the max for certain races and using lower sentences for other races for the same crimes with the same records, okay, and again, this has been shown in studies, then guess what? That's racism. It's systemic. So, the studies that I have seen have shown that black people are sentenced on average 3 times harder than white people for the same crimes with the same records. That's systemic. So the law doesn't have to be on its face racist. But if the law is being disproportionately enforced, or sentence, or being interpreted harder for one race than the other, then that's systemic. Now, I'm not saying, again, that judges are doing this like in their head. They're saying, I'm going to sentence this guy's black, I'm going to sentence him differently. But even if it's subconscious, it's still systemic if it's happening all over and it's happening on average that much. And it is a problem. Now, here's the thing. I am not saying that means we defund the police. That doesn't mean that all cops are bad or all judges are bad or any of that stuff. It doesn't mean that one thing or the other. I'm not making a value judgment on one side's decision on how we fix that or another. But what I am saying is it is an actual problem. And until we all acknowledge that it's a problem, um, then I don't think there's ever going to be a fix. And here's the other thing that kind of baffles me about this. I don't understand. And this person said I'm a conservative. I would say I am a conservative, but I don't think I am a Republican anymore. I mean, I wouldn't say that. So as somebody who's just looking and someone who has a degree in government, um, and somebody who has a law degree, and has all of those things, and just looking at this, I don't understanding history, why the Democrats are kind of like the ones leading the charge on this one. I mean, like, Republicans, your guys are the ones about limited government, right? You're the ones who are like, don't tread on me. Well, if police officers are going out and they're arresting a certain race, like a lot more, or judges are keeping people in prison longer, I would think that as the conservative who talks about liberty and don't tread on me, that this would be what you're championing, right? But anyway, I digress. So that's what I mean when I say I do believe there is systemic racism. That does, like I said, again, I'm not saying I throw myself in the hat with the Democrats and think that their answers to how they fix that are right. I'm just saying I acknowledge it as a problem. Okay. Next one. Dear Josh, I appreciate the podcast and value your opinion on religious matters greatly. I have been struggling a little bit at church. I have a deep rooted issue that I am working through, and my bishop is really not being sympathetic to my plight. It makes me question my whole outlook on organized religion in general. There are a lot of things actually that make me question religion, like the Israel versus Palestine conflict. That's a whole nother podcast. So my question for you is, what do you think is good religious leadership, and what do you think local bishops could do to help people better? So I don't want to comment on your bishop. I don't even know what your plight is. I don't know what you're dealing with, and I don't know, it's hard for me to comment not understanding what you're going through, because I don't know what your deal is, but I would say that I understand that it is frustrating when religion isn't being the help that it was meant to be. And unfortunately, that does happen in some situations. So I feel for you there. But I would encourage you not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And what I mean by that is you don't have to forego your entire uh moral system or your whole basis of identity as a member of the church just because you've had a bad experience with a bishop. That just understand that just because a bishop may have a greater portion of the spirit or a certain stewardship just because of his calling, that doesn't mean that he doesn't still hold biases or life experiences or faults that inform decisions that sometimes can be wrong, just like any priesthood holder who is a steward over his own home as a father who would make mistakes in raising his own kids. So, and that goes, in my opinion, and some people think this is controversial, I think that goes from the father who has the stewardship over his own home all the way up to the prophet. So they're all subject to making mistakes and saying things and acting in a way that is imperfect because they're imperfect human beings. Now, to your question about what do we do, I think your question was, let me read it again. What do you think is good religious leadership, and what do you think local bishops could do to help people better? I think in my experience in leadership, I think in my experience as a member, The best leaders meet people where they are. Let me share a story with you. I don't know if I've shared this on the podcast before, but I've shared it certainly in person many times. So I want to talk about a young men's leader I had when I was a kid named Roy Sorensen. And he's local here. I think he's in the East Stake now. And super good guy. Before he became a young men's president, I knew him a little bit because I coached elementary school basketball in high school, and he kind of ran the whole thing, right? So I knew him a little bit. But then he came in and moved into our ward, and he became a young men's president. And I, at the time, had a reputation of being a bit rebellious, a bit rough around the edges, a little hard to get to. I didn't really listen to my leaders. You know, I had a streak of rebellion in me. And so Roy came in, and he'd been, I can't even remember how long he'd been there, just a few weeks. And we did a planning meeting, like we had everybody come together and plan what they wanted to do. And one day he came up to me and he just said, Josh, I hear you're a wrestler. And I said, yeah, I've been training in pro wrestling. And he goes, what do you think about doing a backyard wrestling mutual night? And I was like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah. What do you think? And I was like, yeah, I would absolutely. Yes, let's do that. Right. And I had a buddy of mine, Gil Nunez, who was living with me at the time. And, he also trained a little bit less than me. But, when my training facility that I was going to shut down, I was trying to teach Gil everything I knew in my backyard. Right. We were just kind of goofing around with a little mattress. So Roy put it together. He's like, I'm going to get a video camera. I'm going to get some other guys I know. We'll do a few matches. It'll just be a lot of fun. We'll record it and it'll just be hilarious. And I just said, okay. And I remember Gil and I being like, I don't think he understands what he just did. And so anyway, the show, so the day comes, and he brought some old guys from another ward, another stake, to come in, and they were kind of goofing around and just laughing and being kind of goofy and powder puffing around. And Gil and I were watching these other guys. We were the main event, and we were looking at them, and I was just like, they have no idea what's coming. And so we went in there, and I mean, we brought it. I mean, like chairs, tables, big metal bars. I mean, we were body slamming, power bombing. Like, I mean, it was just like no wrestling psychology at all. I had no idea what was going on. It was a typical backyard match. And back in the 90s, backyard wrestling was like a big deal because it had been all over reality TV and all these different things, and people knew about it. And there were all these backyard wrestling things popping up. So highly controversial. And I ended up getting a cut on my head and bleeding. It was crazy. And so, anyway, so Roy got a lot of crap for that. Like, the stake president was not too happy about hearing about this. But here's what happened next, which I thought was really interesting. So about 2 or 3 weeks later, we had like a spiritual mutual night, and I didn't show up. And the next Sunday, Roy pulled me aside and he said, listen, Josh, I stuck my neck out for you and did something really fun for your mutual, for you specifically. So if you're going to do that, if I'm going to do that for you, I expect you to be here when we do something spiritual. Fair enough. And that's what I did. So I started coming mutual every week. And anytime Roy needed anything, I did it. Anytime he needed me to take needed someone to take sacrament, he pointed at me and said, Josh, I think you should come with me. And he brought me with him. Then when I turned 18 and a half, and he handed me he and the bishop came to me and were like, we'd like you to start filling out mission papers. And as I was going through those things and I was doing those things, I was starting to feel the Spirit more. And I was starting to enjoy church. I was starting to enjoy those things. And it helped me get to that place to even get on a mission to have my testimony go. Now, here's the thing. I'm sure the stake president would have preferred that Roy had not done that backyard wrestling mutual night. But I gotta tell you, had that not happened, I don't know if I would have ever gone on a mission. Roy, the Savior shares a story in the Bible where they ask him about why he goes and ministers to these people who are, outcasts. And he says, "What shepherd who has 100 sheep and one gets lost does not leave the 99 and go after the one?" Roy saw that I was potentially lost, and he left the 99 who didn't care about wrestling and wasn't going to be involved in it, and he came and found the one and found me. And I got to tell you, I attribute all of my spiritual experiences to his willingness to stick his neck out and do something a little non-conventional. And I've paid that forward. I've paid that forward myself. I'll share another story. I was an elders quorum president. The missionaries were working. I can't remember if he was a less active or if he was a less active member or if he was investigating. But they had a member or a guy who they were teaching, who they were having a real hard time getting him to come to functions and meeting people for whatever reason. And so I asked the missionaries at a correlation meeting, I said, "Well, what does he like to do?" He said, "He really likes MMA." And I said, "Well, wait a minute. Conor McGregor is going to be fighting Floyd Mayweather in a few weeks. I was thinking about getting the pay-per-view. Let's make it an elders quorum party." And they were like, "Okay." And my presidency was like, "Can we do that?" And I'm like, "I don't know, but we're gonna," right? I thought for sure I was gonna get I was like, "This is gonna get me released for sure." I was like, "This is great. I don't have to be an elders quorum president anymore. This will be great." And so we started getting to work. We bought a bunch of food. We get all these things. We send out the invites. Not only did we get this guy to show up, but we got 85 other people to show up as well from the ward. Less actives, non-members, active members. They all showed up, and the missionaries stopped by and was able to talk to all these people. So sometimes you have to do something a little unconventional and find the one. So hopefully more bishops will be open to doing that. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay, one more. Josh, enjoying your podcast. I don't listen to all of them. I mainly listen to the wrestling podcasts. Well, if you listen to the wrestling podcast, keep listening because I got a couple in the can. I already gave up the Jake the Snake, but I got another one that you're going to be excited about. I mainly listen to the wrestling podcast, but every one I do, even if it isn't right in my wheelhouse, I find something I can take away. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. You always ask your 3 questions at the end. So I'm curious, what is your biggest regret? Keep it up. You are awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. You're awesome. What is my biggest regret? I would say staying too long in a spot where I was made to believe that I was hard to love. Because nobody deserves that. So, a lot of bad things have happened as a result. A lot of bad things. And I've had to work through a lot of that, and still am, right? I mean, it's been a road, to say the least. But the thing is I'm okay with it. Uh, Maybe not 100%, but I'm getting to the place where I'm okay with it. And that's taken a lot of work, but I understand that everything that has happened to me shaped what I see in the mirror. And the guy I see in the mirror now is strong and he's healthy, he's driven, he's successful, he works hard, he gets up every morning no matter what. He loves his kids, he's a good father, and he's a decent human being who legitimately cares about people, like really cares about them and wants what's best for them, even the ones who've hurt him. And I really wouldn't trade that for the world. So, yeah, I'm strangely at peace with it. And I am so ready for what's coming next. I really am. So, okay, I think that is everything. So, this last month, just I'll wrap it up here. This last month of podcasting has been really interesting to me because I've seen a little bit of growth. The growth was not as much as normal, I think, is specifically just around the holidays. I think people are just so busy, they're not listening to podcasts. I mean, it's not like I've lost it, just it's not as big a growth, but it's still growing. I'm still adding subscribers every day, which I'm grateful for. Um, but this has been an interesting month because of the level of guests, like Robert Schaefer, you know, and I've got a few more, quote unquote name celebrities, Santino Morella, right? Like I'm starting to get more people like that coming on, and it adds a little bit of pressure. Um, because it's like this isn't just like a fun thing I'm doing with my friends anymore. It's kind of becoming like a real thing. Um, but I've come to the conclusion that I'm not going to let it become pressure. It's become successful because of the way I handle it. And so I'm going to still do that. So if I get a chance to interview a celebrity, I'll take it. Um, but I'm not going to stop interviewing my friends. I'm not going to stop interviewing people I find interesting, um, regardless of whether they're going to, hundreds or thousands of people are going to be interested in listening to them. If I'm interested in listening to them, I'm going to interview them. And I got some really interesting stuff coming up in December, including we're coming up on 100, which means Austin Edlow is going to be coming on, and that's going to be exciting. I'm really interested in that one because he's my least of all of my kids. He is my least public. He doesn't like, which is strange because he's a lead singer of a rock band. He is in a choir where he sings in front of people all the time, but he just is very much not like, he doesn't like he doesn't like being the center of attention, which is so interesting. And so, but he's ready to come on. He knew, episode 100 will be him. So that's going to be really meaningful to me too. So this is still fun. I'm grateful for all the questions. I'm grateful for all the thought-provoking stuff. I'm grateful for all of you. I hope you all just keep killing it, and subscribe if you haven't already. We will keep going until the wheels fall off. And until then, have a good one, and we will see you soon.